program. And so we have a program that generates a lot of different data that we don't always have the time to look at, because we look at the main things like did they pass or not. And so they have taken a huge initiative to try to manage some of this data that's just available in massive amounts, and they've done a really good job with that. So I'll present Joel and Holly.
This is an analysis of EdReady and class attendance here at JSU. I'm going to talk about the EdReady side of things, and then Holly's going to take over and talk about class attendance and our findings with that. So first,
oh, that's not even plugged in.
I bet you're moving the other one forward, though.
In case you're that might just work. If not, arrow keys will be your next.
Okay.
We'll see what happens here.
So first, what is EdReady? EdReady is an online learning platform that offers math and English preparation. Now here at JSU, the platform is used in part for the math placement exam for students to know which tracks that they're prepared for and the courses within them. I have a couple charts here on the screen that show different tracks and the different point requirements for courses within them. So if students are not able to meet that initial score that they need for their course, they're able to work within EdReady to bring up their score on an individual basis, which is great because that puts a lot less risk on that initial placement exam. So we analyzed an Excel spreadsheet of EdReady system data. Now this spreadsheet had information for each student, like the number of hours that they'd used EdReady, the overall score gain that they saw, which is the difference between their initial diagnostic score and their most recent score. And we looked at that spreadsheet and tried to identify the different study paths that were within it, because we wanted to be able to look at students as a group accurately. Look at the students who'd used EdReady within a specific amount of time. And we saw that there were roughly the same number of students in the 2017 to 2018 path as there were in the 2018 to 2019 path. But we went with the 2017 to 2018 path because that path had already been completed by this point, so there's more information to be gathered. And with that roughly 4,900 group of students, we looked at their choice of using the system. We honed in on a field that we thought most reflected that choice, the amount of time that the students used EdReady. And then we looked at something we thought might correspond to that choice, the most recent score that the student experienced and their overall score gain. So we took the data from our spreadsheet and piped it into a SQL Server database using SQL Server integration services. And so that once the information was in that database, we could query it to analyze results and have our data in particular formations and patterns. And then we took those query results and put them into Excel graphs and Power BI graphs as well. So if we're first to get a feel for the hours that the student used EdReady, and we look at a histogram showing the frequency of the hour intervals, we can see that roughly, a vast majority of our students used EdReady 10 hours or less, and practically all the students used EdReady 30 hours or less. So we keep that in mind as we move forward. And if we look at the hours a student used EdReady versus the average score gain that they saw, we can see that from 0 to 10 hours, there's a pretty steep incline in the score gain the students are seeing. And then after 10 hours, there's a lot of variability. But we know that most of our students fall within that 10-hour range. So if we zoom into the graph further, we can see that particularly from, say, 2.5 to 10 hours, there's a pretty steep upward climb in the average score gain. So, the students who are using EdReady 2 hours are seeing students who are using EdReady 4 hours are seeing practically a 20-point difference in the average score gain that they see compared to students who used EdReady 2 hours. Now if we look at the hours a student used EdReady versus the average most recent score, we again from 0 to 10 hours see a pretty steep incline. After 10 hours, there's a lot of noise and variability. And if we zoom in on that graph and look at 10 hours or less, we can see that, particularly between 2 and 4 hours, there's a pretty steep climb in the average score that students are seeing. And if we then look at the median most recent score, we can see that after the 4-hour mark, the scores are typically hovering around the 80-point mark, which is interesting because that leads to the idea that students are using EdReady as long as they need to hit their goal, their target score point, which I'm guessing is right around 80, and then ceasing use of the system. So some other findings we found that students on average used EdReady about an hour each time they were logged in, on average logged into EdReady 13 times, and as you might expect from our histogram, on average used EdReady about 10.5 hours total. So in conclusion, for the EdReady side of things, we found that there was a positive correlation between the hours that the student used EdReady and both their most recent score and overall score gain. And that is looking at students who used EdReady 10 hours or less. And as I mentioned, EdReady offers a study path option for students who need to work to bring up their score. But if they're not able to bring up the score on their own, JSU offers additional services to help them out. Holly's going to take over and talk about those services and our findings with them.
So for students who do not place high enough on the placement exam and who do not complete the study path through EdReady in order to enroll in MS 112, they must enroll in MS 100, Intermediate Algebra. There's also a study path for MS 110, but we're going to focus on 112. So there are two types of MS 100 courses available. There's regular, which is treated more as a traditional course, and there's accelerated, which is more intensive, meeting for 5 days a week for 2-hour sessions. Accelerated is aimed at students who had greater difficulties with EdReady. The MS 100 can only be taken once. If the student passes MS 100, he or she can then move on to MS 112. If the student does not pass MS 100, then he or she must enroll in LS 106, Algebra Tutorial. LS 106 has much increased student-teacher interaction, and LS 106 must be repeated until it's passed. Once the student passes LS 106, then he or she can then enroll in MS 112. It's worth noting that these classes can be failed. The student either passes or they receive no credit. So we received Excel spreadsheets created by professors who taught MS 100 and LS 106 in 2017. These spreadsheets contain information pertaining to the course and how the students performed overall. We decided to look at the students' attendance rates versus the students' pass rates. So we analyzed this data by organizing it into an Excel spreadsheet, first by whether or not the student met the attendance requirement, and then by whether or not the student passed. We then created graphs based on this data. So in the regular MS 100 course, for students who met the attendance requirement, we found an 84% pass rate. For students who did not meet the attendance requirement, there was a 60% pass rate. In the accelerated class, only 4 students met the attendance requirement, but there was a 75% pass rate. Of the students who failed to meet the attendance requirement, there was only a 29% pass rate. In LS 106, none of the 19 students met the attendance requirement, and 5% of those students passed. We also looked at all of the students combined across these 3 courses, and we found that overall the students who met an attendance requirement had an 84% pass rate. The students who did not meet the attendance requirement only had a 38% pass rate. We also looked at attendance as a percentage in each of the courses. We see a pretty sharp drop-off between each of the 3 courses. There could be a host of issues behind these declining numbers. Perhaps the students are feeling intimidated or overwhelmed after not passing the previous courses, or maybe these students just do not like math. Whatever the reason is, the students know they have to pass the courses, but they're not showing up to learn the material, and that's concerning for those students. In conclusion, we found a positive correlation between attending class and passing class. And we also found that attendance rates tended to drop between those 3 courses.
And overall, we found that, that studying with EdReady increases EdReady scores, which then has a big impact on the students and their progress through their courses here at JSU, because they're able to get on the math track that they want to earlier. And we found, as Holly mentioned, that class attendance positively influences pass rates. So that concludes our presentation. Are there any questions?